Alright, welcome back. This is Kevin McCain with Kevin McCain Studios and Idaho Art Classes. So I'm going to show a concept where we're going to use some underpainting to anchor the values of this little apple that I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be using Payne's Gray and mixtures of Payne's Gray and mixtures of burnt umber. And we're going to be using Payne's Gray for the shadows. I'm even going to have a little bit more blue in here to cool down the shadows even a little bit more. And then we're going to have a little bit, of the warmth from the, and I might even use a little bit more yellow and red for just a tiny bit more orange in the lights. But we're going to start to paint this. I'm going to be using a I think I'm going to start with a bigger brush. Got a couple little strokes there. Not the ones I'm hoping to keep, so I'm going to, and I got to make sure that this brush that I'm using does not have a whole bunch of paint in it. And it had a lot of purple, which would have been not what I want in here. So we're going to start off with this. Just again, we're going to keep it a little bit warmer on the lit side. I'm going to be doing this about 20% lighter than the actual values, because I'm going to need to come over this with red. And so this is just supposed to help influence and anchor some of the different values that we've got on this this apple of mine. Can I pull a little bit more orange in here just to get a little bit more warmth in for my apple here. And be neutralizing some of these a little bit, so less warm as we come across here, so we have a little bit of mixture between the brown and the Payne's Gray as we're continuing to paint this. We're then going to come into the shadows with some of the Payne's Gray itself. And this is really, we're trying to get the temperature shifts as much as anything else. Then we're going to get parts of this that are really going to be cool, and so I've got even a little bit more blue that I've added to the Payne's Gray. Now this is, since I'm working with reds, and the reds will be going from more purple to more orange, I can push this with the blue. If I was doing something where I didn't want as much blue in there, let's say this was going to be an orange or something, I would probably, I'd be very careful, because that would be a complementary color scenario, and that's not what I'm going to want. So I want to be careful about that as I'm painting this. And I'm just trying to get the whole thing covered right now. This is in shadow. That's too big for me to use up here, so I'm going to grab a little bit of this number 10 round. As this comes around, it's going to warm a little bit, so we've got some of this mixture that's got a little bit of the brown in it, so we're going in from a little warmer, and then we're going to come in here and drop some of the brown straight into there, kind of where it meets the light and shadow meet on this thing. And we just barely got this started, okay? And for this, I don't really care as much about striations. I mean, we're going to do a second run here. We're going to put a little more information, but I want you to understand that we're not worried too much about every little nuance. I mean, if I was doing some sort of hyperrealism, maybe, but that's not what we're doing here. We're just going to try to get some of the, as it comes down, this is going to be a little darker, this is a little lighter up through here. Again, I'm keeping it lighter as I'm doing this, because again, we're going to this is just to anchor some of the values, not all. the values. So I'm going to be using sort of a semi-wet brush now, and we're going to be laying in some, we're going to give a nod to some of the striations, the pigment happening on this on our apple. Okay. This comes down, we start to pick up some of the tablecloth, which begins to cool. Get some of the values in here. Right, I still want to come in here with some of this Payne's gray. I used a little bit of the blue because it seemed like I needed to shift the temperature in here very quickly. And so we want to make sure we've got some of that. Again, I'm going to come in here with a little bit of the yellow, the orange come across here, where again we're just going to change temperature very quickly, right across through there. Kind of lost some of that because I made a thirsty brush, so I pulled the paint right back off of there. So we're going to bring that back in again. Okay. You know, again, this is a point where we can, you know, if I was doing some of this, I could pull a little bit for some textural effects to indicate some of the pigmentation changes that, you know, striations and things that are on this apple. I could, you know, do some of that. Like so. Again, I'm going to come in here with a little bit more Payne's gray. Now again, like I said, this is to anchor our values. This is going to be lighter. I think we need a little more blue in here. Just seemed a little too warm. And this is all about warm to cool. Take the Payne's gray. Bring a little more Payne's gray in here. That's a little wetter than I'd hoped. Now there's a reflected light in here too. So I might actually bring this and draw this back in here for that reflected light. That's on both sides of this apple. Okay, so I'm going ahead and I'm pulling out some paint a little bit, and then we're going to add some more paint. We're just going to go back and forth, and that's how we're going to deal with this. This is starting to dry a little bit and has some water lines. I want to be careful of the water lines. I'm not looking to make those right now. So that's not part of the plan. Okay. I'm going to look at this a little bit more. We don't have the core shadow in here at all. So I'd be bringing the core shadow up onto here. You know, we do want to give a nod to the form shadows. We don't want this core shadow to get too dark though, because we do want some of the color in there, the red, to be, you know, if we get this too dark, it's going to really affect the red more than I probably want to. So again, we are going to make this on the lighter side as we're dealing with this. This got a little bit too light, so I'm going to have to glaze this back down because I can't tell if that's shadow or light, which is not a good thing. When I can't tell the difference, I'm in big trouble. So we're going to go ahead and just lighten this up a bit. Starting to get where this is starting to crawl. It's not a good... And remember, we've always got more control when we darken, or not darken, when we wet something down. So we need the paint to actually be wet so we can have control over it. This is watercolor, and again, too many times we think we can start to go, well, I'll have more control as it starts to dry down a little bit. You don't, you have less control. So if I want more control again, I have to re-wet this whole area in order to get the paint to start to flow again. Otherwise, I'll have no control over it. And I usually you end up with a mess when you start doing that. And now when I put away the flat actually takes off more value. I'll start to pull paint, and I still want to add some paint, so I'm gonna put that aside. This will be my middle values. So let's see. We're gonna go ahead and again put some of these middle values in here. As they come around through this apple. Can we have it fairly dark through here where it gets a little bit lighter because of reflected light. So we need enough value for that to actually read like this is reflected light down here. That was probably a little bit much, but I think that'll be fine. I think we'll get away with that. Now again, some of this, the light to dark is really going to take a back seat to warm versus cool. This is really what this is about, is this warm versus cool thing. Okay. That was a little too dark, so we're going to take that back off a little bit, lighten it up. Come back up here. Some of that. Alright. Again, we're going to go ahead and bring some of this down. The striations are going to break into that reflected area too. Again, we're not going too nuts with this. We're not trying to do like a full black and white, you know, like it's a photograph. That'd be too dark because we have to glaze. If we were dealing with something other than watercolor, well then maybe. But in oil paint, yeah, we do this a little. We do the correct values, but in watercolor we have to build it up over the top of this, and so if we build it up to those darkest darks, it's probably going to be too dark for us to actually get the look that we're wanting, and so we want to hold off on it a little bit. Okay. So we're going to take just a little bit more of this, have just a little bit more of the Payne's Gray. Okay, I'm going to bring a little bit more of the Payne's Gray in here. Maybe just a tiny bit more of the blue. And we're going to go ahead and we need enough value, again, right against here where we start to have that reflected light, for it to read like that's what it is, that it's reflected light pushing up in there. Okay. I just took some of that out because it's just a little bit much. Okay. Again, now what we're going to do is we're going to try to get maybe just a little bit more darkness and coolness in that core shadow as far as this goes. And I think maybe I'll just drop this in. I should have used paper that was stretched, but I grabbed 140 pound and it's starting to buckle on me. And the only way to control this with any sort of, well, first off, you wouldn't want to do this. You'd be like, I'm going to be smarter. I'm going to actually get the paper I'd want to use. But the only way to really control this at this point is to use that dropping in method. It's wet enough that I can still drop some stuff in, but it's getting semi-wet, so if it's too wet, it'll bloom. Now some of this is going to soften as I come through this second time. With the color and such. So that's some good news. I keep taking extra water off of this so it doesn't get too wet, so I don't have any bloom problems. As far as that goes, I just got a little bit of warm versus cool. Now I don't think we have enough of that sort of the neutral in the middle. It just seems like it's going from warm and then really cool, and so I'm going to go ahead and drop some of this. This is oh, that's going to bloom a little bit. But this is the this is where we've mixed between the two. Now I'm not really concerned about that bloom near as much right now. It's blooming a little bit, but it's it's not going to be huge. And I'm going to be going fairly dark over this with my reds. So I'm not near as concerned about it as if it was at a different place. I can go ahead and work with it. And some of the blooms will actually start to look like some of the, you'll start to get things on the apple that looks like you have little splashes of pigment that are a little darker, a little brighter here or there, and it can start to look like some of the things that happen when you start to have light blooms here and there. Again, I'm still dropping stuff in, building it up almost with this sort of little stippling. I've kind of gone as far as I can go with that. I need to leave that alone for now. And there's one other place I want to deal with, and that's back here. It's back here is in shadow. Okay. All right. Now it's a little flat through here, but I think it'll be fine. So we're going to go ahead and let some of this dry. Then we're going to come over this with the red paint and pull this together. And again, the reason to do this is to keep your warms warm and your cools cool. I'm going to go ahead and try to clean this up just a scotch. Because this has a very irregular edge, which again is not usually what I'm looking for. Okay. All right. This could be a part where we could almost come in here and almost dry brush. I'd have to make sure that this brush is really quite dry. So all right. So we're going to call that good for now. Again, I'm going to be able to bring this into the reds. Now, we're going to have some of the tablecloth in here. And the tablecloth is much, we're going to keep it a little more neutral. And again, lighter, so we have to be careful that we don't go too dark on this tablecloth. So of course we'd have the cast shadow here. Okay. So I got a little bit of that. We're going to have, there's some places here where we have some lights. Again, we're going to use this warm and cool palette. If we don't do this everywhere, it's going to look a little strange. So soften this, keep it nice and soft. There's some places back here that get a little cooler. Again, they're really light. That was too dark, so we're going to lighten this up a little bit with some water. As far as that goes, there's another one again up here that's kind of in a sort of a middle value. So again, we're going to use some of the cool over here, like Payne's Gray. Right, just a little bits. Don't want too much in there. Leave the light there, and then of course where it goes over the table, spills over the side of the table. You know, this is going to be cooler over here. This is the basic, you know, just a very simple be a little darker, a tiny bit darker, not a ton. So we'd have, again, this is the tablecloth spilling over the side of the table. Just a little bit of that warm versus cool. There's part of this tablecloth that comes up that's a little bit further back, and again we could bring, now I'm going to bring a little bit more because it gets a little cooler as it comes up into here, and this is, you know, again where this comes around and down, and this surrounds this apple. Now if I was doing this, I'd have a little bit more care with these strokes than I am right now, because this is a sketch. You know, obviously we can't sit here for, you know, watch me do this for 6 hours. But whether we're doing it quickly or whether we're doing it slowly, the decisions are the same. It's just controlling it a little bit, taking a little more time to control it, take a little bit more time to deal with some of the stuff that might be happening on here. Thought we might bring a little bit more of the blue up into here. We have this recede a little bit more. We have this recede a little bit more. This edge seems a little bit much, so we'll stroke with water right along that edge, like so. Maybe these edges are a little bit much, so we'll come over and stroke them with a little bit of water, soften them up just a scotch. Use my paper towel to then see if I can keep them softer. I want the cast shadow a little starker. Alright, so then we can come in here. And again, I should have babysat this edge a little bit more. So we're going to see if we can come over here and soften some of this water line that's been going on. Maybe the answer is we can't. Well, we're going to try. Okay. Let's see. I'm going to take some pure water. I'm going to be blotting it and softening it. Okay, that's softening it up. I'm going to reestablish that edge when I come over with the reds. So again, I'm not gonna lose sleep over it. You really can work with this stuff more usually than what people normally think. They'd be like, "Oh, I ruined it. Oh, that'll never be the same." And I mean, there's some truth to that, but we can work with it a lot of times where you're like, yeah, you'd never know it. So what we're going to do is we're going to let this dry out. We're then going to come over the top of this with some of these reds. All right, so we're going to come on back. Take care. All right, and so we're back. So we've got this apple that's dried down a little bit. And now I think I'm going to go ahead and re-wet this very gently. I'm using the brush almost parallel to the surface. I don't want any more friction than is absolutely necessary to get this wet. And I need water to float the paint around. I'm going to go ahead and turn this so I can see over here, you know, how wet this is. We look for the sheen. Through being able to see the sheen, we can tell how dry or how wet something is. This is dry right through there. And dry right through here. Again, I was trying to tell how wet or how dry this is. Okay. I think I'm going to take off any excess water. So I just went ahead and took off some of the excess. And now we're going to start painting this apple. I'm going to start off with some of the orange or reds that are up here. I grab my 1-inch brush. Okay. I'm working in the middle values now. Bring some of that red in here. All right. All right. Bring in some of the deeper reds onto this. For our middle values, I think I need to lay in some of the reds here in the shadows. All right. Gonna get my number 10. We're gonna come in here, and these are very much violet back in there. Well, that's too wet. Okay. So, I'm gonna go ahead and take my paper towel. We're gonna go ahead and, that was a dye color, so this has changed forever. This color through here. That's alright. I left it there with a lighter yellower color than what it is. So I can come back in here and see if we can do that, warm this up with a red that's a little bit brighter and warmer as far as that goes. I'm gonna look at this. Seems like I'm gonna see if we can take and get a little bit more. It's pretty wet through there. I'll take that off. Some of it, I'm at least gonna move it around. I'm then gonna dry brush a little bit, so I'm picked up as dry a paint as I can. Okay. So we're putting stuff down, we're taking stuff off. It's a wonderful, it's the fun process about working on watercolors. You can really play with the color as it moves. Okay. All right. And then we've got a little bit more red down here. I'm going to try to take just a little bit of this, bring this down. And this reflected light area. Then we go, okay, wait a minute, we've got some darker darks here. So I'm going to take and darken some of our red for the dark middle values. And this little sort of area where it begins to go down to that reflected light, like so. Pardon me. All right. Now we're going to come in here for some of the darker reds. Deeper reds of this apple. So we're just continuing to lay color in here. There's a point at which apple starts to go down into the funnel, but it's not quite into the blues yet, where it's starting to get a little bit darker. Then it goes into shadow. Looks like we need some more darks back there. So we're going to bring some deeper values in there. Like so. Sort of the core shadow we haven't put in here yet. So we go ahead and put the core shadow would come through here and down into this apple. Like so. Lighten that a little bit. Soften it a little bit. Soften this side a little bit. Like so. Okay, we're going to bring just a little bit more. Could also come on in over here. Try to see if we could take some of the lightest lights. Try to break into there a little bit. Some of this reflected light in here. See if we can pull some of that out a little bit. Come in here for the darkest darks, for this core shadow. See if we can bring just a little bit more dark in there. The dark tones. We're going to bring in here, again, bring this down. This is then the reflected light down through here. I'm going to try to do some opaque stuff here real quick. So with opaque paint, you can just kind of bump something just a little bit more. And so, because it's just a little bit opaque, so we're going to see if we can bring just a little bit some of that in here. Just a scotch. So we're just trying to bring some detail, as we might say, in there. See if we can get just a little bit more value in a couple places. far as that goes. I think this highlight is a little bit too stark, so we're going to see if we can soften that a little bit. See if we can bring just a tiny bit more of this in here in a couple places. Bring some of this up a bit. Doing a little bit of removing with a wet brush. I'm going to do a little bit of the same up here at the top. Do a little removing with this wet brush. Okay. See if I can remove just a little bit more through here. Just a scotch here and there. All right. And let's go ahead and this got a little dark through here, up here, so we're going to try to soften this just a bit. Like so. Like so. All right. We've got this bleed that's in through here that's happening because of the fold in this paper, because I should have, but did not, use stretched paper. Didn't think it was going to be so wet that it would wrinkle up, and obviously it did. That's all right. We can work with this a little bit. Pull that out a little bit. You have to babysit this while it dries if you're going to do that. Keep it in the right places as it's drying. There's the old adage that if it's the value you want when it's wet, it won't be the value you want when it's dry. So you want to be, we want to be cognizant of that. We want to be aware of it as we're dealing with this. We're to the point where we can deal a little bit with the stem. So we're going to come in here with this stem, and we're going to start with sort of our lighter value. I think we need a little bit more yellow in there. I think it's too red. I don't think it'll stand out. In fact, as it gets to that red, we're probably going to get a little bit of complementary color, because all that red's going to surround the stem, and it's going to make the stem look greener than what it actually is, because it's sitting next to all the red. So that happens when you have colors together. The technical term is simultaneous contrast. When two colors are together, both colors are affected and both colors will change and shift. And it's an important concept as we're painting to be aware of it, because it It's always in play. It's always happening. Hence the warm and cool that we were doing. The warm and cool was the fact that, again, we have, you know, the contrast and of the warm light going into shadow. The shadow seems bluer and the warm seems warmer. That's another example of simultaneous contrast. And it's happening all the time. So that's why we always want to be aware of it. So that got a little too purple. You know, I think I'm going to take a little bit of this opaque color. Now, this isn't completely opaque. I'm not mixing white in here. It's just that the cadmium has just enough opacity. Same thing with the cad red. Just enough opacity to do a little bit of shifting the color ever so slightly. Okay, so now we got the stem in there, and we're really just going to clean this up. So this edge right here got a little irregular. I'm taking fairly dry paint at this point. I'm just going to try to see if we can clean up around the edges of this apple. All right, and the whole point of this was to, and it doesn't come off as well, I don't think, on the camera, because cameras just aren't really that great at picking up subtle color shifts. But this is actually, this over here is bluer and cooler, and this over here is warmer, and that's the reason we did this whole thing, is that, again, it helps anchor the value system. So this is, again, where we start glazing with the cool violet, or pardon me, Payne's gray in the shadows, and then the burnt umber in the light. So we already get warm and cool happening right from the very start. Once this is dry, I'd probably pick a couple places on the stem to lighten up just a little bit. But here we go. We've got a cute little apple here. Again, I could come over here and work a little more on the cloth. It's just barely roughed in, and we can make that look a little better. But this is how we're going to use this concept. So give it a try and enjoy. You have yourself a great day. This has been Kevin McCain with Idaho Art Classes. Take care.